Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Thursday, February 19th. Derek VanRiper here with Eno Sarris as we continue our team preview series. 3 more teams on the slate for today, Eno. We have the Seattle Mariners, the Pittsburgh Pirates, and the Miami Marlins. So a nice combination here. A lot of good pitching on this episode. I think it's going to be one of the main themes that we get to. We got 3 writers scheduled to join us for Friday's previews as well. So we'll have a lot more writers on for the rest of the series since their availability starts to open up now that we've gotten into that rhythm for spring training. How's it going for you on this Thursday?
Better than it is for Trevor May. Trevor's computer ate itself. And so we will not have the pleasure of Trevor today. But yeah, things are going all right.
Yeah, I think he'll be missed a lot on this episode, especially since he knows the Mariners very well, but he knows everything really well. Always miss having his insight when we can't get him on a Thursday. Let's get going, though. Tons of stuff to cover. We'll start with the Mariners. This is a team that I think did a really good job of holding it together and getting a couple of nice pieces in the offseason. On the hitter side, the decision to re-sign Josh Naylor was a big one. Bringing him back was huge. He was just a vital part of their team post-trade deadline last year. They made a trade for Brendan Donovan, who gives them some versatility, coverage at third base to begin the season, maybe the possibility of moving him around the infield, depending on how the prospects who come up later in the year fit into the picture. Traded away a guy in Harry Ford who was pretty blocked. That got him a reliever in Jose Ferrer, making that bullpen even deeper. And of course, the strength of this team, as we know, is starting pitching. We'll talk about that in just a couple of minutes. But when you start to look at the hitter group and how the pieces actually come together, you got Cal Raleigh coming off of a season that was as good as any we've ever seen at the plate from a catcher. Julio Rodriguez in that superstar mold, obviously part of their rule of 5. Naylor should be in there too. I think Randy Rosarena is comfortably in that group of 5 right now. And then the 5th spot, I think, is a little bit more flimsy. So is there someone you'd like to be a key everyday guy to start the year who might not be in that spot at the end of the year?
I think it's actually an easy 5 just in terms of quality and defensive ability, because I think J.P. Crawford and Cal Raleigh are just going to be in there for various reasons, defensive and offensive. So you got Randy, Julio, those 2, and Naylor. I think that's your 5. There is an important platoon forming with Rob Refsnyder, either at first or at DH, I believe, the righty that they brought in on a free agent deal. He'll either platoon with Canzone at DH or play first and Naylor DHs, something like that. The other righty is Luis Rivas, who had some moments in the playoffs. I think there's only one of him. And since there's only one of him, there could be a winner between Cole Young and Brendan Donovan. I think that one's kind of easy to call, maybe. I would say Brendan Donovan looks like maybe actually a 6th regular. I know it's a rule of 5, but they don't have the righties in the infield, at least, I think, to platoon both Young and Donovan. So maybe Colt Emerson, who is a lefty, makes the team and pushes things around. That's a possibility. But if they just deem he's someone that they could help their team, and they just say, hey, we've got 3 guys for 2 spots in Young, Emerson, and Donovan, and we'll figure it out. Or Donovan goes to right field because Robles isn't playing well, or whatever it is. Emerson can make this team, but I think Donovan is actually maybe a regular as well, just because I don't think that they have enough righty infielders to platoon him.
Yeah, I think the key here is that, without Jorge Polanco, they seem like they have more defensive versatility on the roster right now. And the redundancies are a little bit more in that bench section, right? It's trying to figure out who plays more out of Luke Raley and Dominic Canzone. Like, some of the job battles are actually interesting for really deep leagues, but as far as your clear and obvious everyday guys, I think you've outlined the 6 guys that they're going to at least open the year with as clear regulars.
Time for my fun fact. Derek was away, so the fun facts are all me for this episode, and some of them are not so fun. But this fun fact is double-edged. It is fun and it is not fun. It begins with the fun. Last year's Mariners offense was the third best in their history.
That's cool. I think that's
by
fun.
WRC Plus. That's fun. Their defensive rating was their 12th worst in their history. And so I don't know that I haven't seen any public comments from Dipoto or anybody on the team in terms of like improving the defense. But, Donovan letting Polanco go, even like Ref Snyder, even getting Robles back, I think they'll improve the defense. When I look at this team, I don't see it as being terrible. The one spot that is a pain point, and this is where Colt Emerson comes into play, Crawford's defensive numbers have been bad for a while. And is there a place where Colt Emerson makes the team as a starting shortstop and Crawford becomes either the second baseman and Young goes down? Oh, don't tell me that. I like Young.
Yeah, that's among the options. I think it might not be the most likely outcome coming from the spring, but I think it's something that could happen over the course of the season. I mean, J.P. Crawford ends up turning in pretty solid numbers overall. He was a 2.8 WAR player last year. Usually a guy like that doesn't turn around the following season and completely lose his starting job, but in a situation where you have a top prospect and you think about the defensive importance of the position, I think that becomes more of a possibility if you get that step back offensively and you're lagging in value and you get to the point in July or August where you need that upgrade. And maybe at that point, Emerson has shown everything possible in the minor leagues. There's no more boxes to tick. Maybe you decide to put him more on that Gunnar Henderson, Corbin Carroll late August promotion list, preserve rookie eligibility for him for next season, but then get the benefits of having him on the roster at the critical points at the end of this one.
Yeah, just so that people have the full context, the bottom of the shortstop fielding run value leaderboard on Savant says Bo Bichette, no longer a shortstop, CJ Abrams, we've talked about him a lot, JP Crawford tied with CJ Abrams, Trevor Story, an older man at shortstop, Anthony Volpe, who was hurt last year, Trey Sweeney, who's I don't know what the plan is there, and Xavier Edwards, who has moved off the position.
I think the thing I like about this team, though, is that it's really well established in terms of the key roles. You just have a pretty good foundational expectation of what they want to do. I think the rotation is interesting because they have an easy and clear, these are the five guys. There's no job battle for a starting rotation spot right now. Health has been a problem, though, for nearly everybody in this group at some point in the last 2 years. And it's a lot of arm injuries, too, up and down that bunch. So if there's one thing that makes me a little bit nervous is that they may not get the same overall outcome health-wise with this group. Like the catastrophic injury could come for one or two guys in this rotation just because of the precursors we've seen from them in the last couple of years.
Brian Wu has had TJ surgery. He's also had pec problems. I actually can't right now recall Luis Castillo's problems other than the sort of early velo. He might be the one that seems the healthiest, but he's also maybe the lowest upside guy. George Kirby, 2 straight years of shoulder soreness. Logan Gilbert, forearm soreness or forearm strain, often a precursor to TJ. And then Bryce Miller has loose bodies still floating around in that elbow. He decided not to get the surgery. So yeah, that's a bit of a worrisome group. It's terrible because for the team and for fantasy, that's a big part of the team. If the Mariners don't work out this year, it's probably because there were a couple injuries in that rotation.
Yeah, the Castillo injury I was thinking of was a shoulder injury during one of his seasons with the Reds, 2022. That slowed him down at the beginning of the year, so it's pretty far in the rearview mirror. But of the 5, he's the one that you're most worried about from just a pure skills perspective at this point, because I think what we saw decline-wise from Bryce Miller last year wasn't the actual result of skills loss beyond the impact of an injury, right? It was bone spurs that were causing a problem for him. We know in the bullpen, Andres Munoz, we talked about this in the closer preview. The way he's used, he is just used like a closer. He's not used for extended outings. I think they've really honed in on how they just have that role set up as a specialist role. Maybe you veer from that a little bit if you get back into the postseason, but I think he's pretty easily a top 5, top 6 type closer for me, firmly inside the circle of trust. I think the question I have as a result of the injuries we brought up with the rotation as a group is there a next guy up that actually makes sense, like to take over a spot and actually be fantasy relevant? Because Emerson Hancock on paper is probably the number 6 starter, but the bits we've seen from him so far as a big league starter don't really bring enough for us to get all that excited about him for our rosters.
Yeah, Emerson Hancock, has 4 pitches. Only the slider rates as above average. This seems like a Mariners team that really loves good sliders. So that's not too surprising. But the stuff numbers, the strikeout numbers, they've never been good. The command is okay. I think he's okay if you have a short stretch. You just hey, guys out 2-3 weeks, we need you for a few starts. I think, while he's got options, he's got one left, he's going to be useful in that way. And for fantasy, I guess I could see using Emerson Hancock in a home start against a bad opponent offensively. There's still times when he would make sense streaming wise. There could be something he could do in spring to catch my attention. I don't know. Could he throw a cutter along with the sinker and fastball and have 3 fastballs? Could he throw a new curveball? Like a new pitch might change things, but it won't change the fact that his fastballs aren't good by themselves. So I think that's the real problem there. And so, if there is a catastrophic injury, with Criswell, stuff models have liked him some, and he locates the ball well, but he's never struck guys out, and he does not have really good velo. So, I think he's another short stretch guy. I think if there's a real problem, they may be tempted to go to Cade Anderson. Cade Anderson was their number 1 pick last year, but he's coming out of LSU. And I know he hasn't pitched much in the minors, but I know this is a team that is willing to push guys. So if they start him in A-ball, and by the time, the injury happens, maybe halfway through the season, he's already in Double-A, and he has a 33% strikeout rate and looks as excellent as they thought he was when they made him their 3rd pick overall. Like, it wouldn't be crazy. We've done this before. Who was it? Was it Singer? No, who was the pitcher that just went right, that missed the minors? Oh, he was with the Diamondbacks. Huh? Mike Leake. Yeah. I don't know if that didn't turn out so great. He did it.
Mike Leake had a good career. Mike Leake got paid.
Yeah, that's true. But otherwise, in terms of their prospects, I guess the other guy to highlight is Ryan Sloan. Sloan has the benefit of having pitched some. He's their 2nd round pick from 2024. He got up to high A last year. If Sloan is in Double-A, I guess he's probably ahead of Cade. And if he's dominating, they may, if there's a long-term injury, they may go to him over Criswell or Emerson Hancock.
Yeah, I think that's a possibility, having to be a little more aggressive. And yeah, we haven't even seen the professional debut of Cade Anderson yet, but he did throw 119 innings during his final season at LSU and was dominant. That's what made him the number 3 overall pick in the draft last summer. So you could definitely see it. I don't know if there's a lot of draft in the hold stash appeal there. I think it's a little bit more of a, hey, if he comes up, this might actually be a rookie to throw fab at if he's on that kind of fast track. But too early to say.
Check this out. Fangraphs has his Cade Anderson's ETA as 2026. They have Ryan Sloan's as 2028. So
that's pretty aggressive. Usually, I think Eric and the team at Fangraphs are very reasonable with the ETAs. They don't go pie in the sky like the aggressive approach that we hope teams would use. They're like realists about it. So if you see a 2026 on there, like that's actually pretty meaningful.
I guess, one of the side questions, which we can't answer right now, and it's just to kind of set us on the wrong track, but what quality of baseball is LSU and like, is there a chance that he was in such good competition that he was already playing A ball, basically?
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to be a really relevant discussion as we in the CBA when we discuss the idea that maybe we remove low A entirely, and they're bandying about the idea that maybe you can't draft out of high school at all, and so basically we'd be seeding high A, or we'd be seeding low A as a development spot to college. So we'd be kind of basically in effect saying, college is about the same as low A. So everyone go to college, at least for a year.
Looking at the overall body of work for the offseason, what grade are you giving the front office for their decision making?
I'm going to go with an A-. Why is it not a full A? I don't know. It's I think I would have liked to have seen maybe some starting pitching depth put in there. They had Naylor and Jorge Polanco. I think the Donovan trade made it an A. But if there had been another signing to push Young into a depth spot, like that would have been an A+. So I think it was a good offseason. But the two places that like I look are, they still have like a hole offensively, possibly in, corner outfield, DH, second base. We don't know what's coming from there. And then the starting pitching depth is a problem.
Pacoda's projection from Baseball Prospectus has 93.6 wins. Too hot, too cold, or just right for these Mariners?
I don't want to upset anybody. Don't get mad at me. I think it's too hot.
Oh, have you used the too hot yet? Maybe
I think
one.
So.
I think one.
But the starting pitching depth concerns me. It concerns me. I think this is hanging on to, if they can get, I don't know, 600-700 innings from those 5 guys, then I think they'll be fine. They'll be good. They might win 95 games.
It's getting those innings and then having 3 of them, and one of those 3 not necessarily being Luis Castillo, healthy for October. Like, that's the kind of like key to holding it all together.
That's for them to get to the World Series or to finally get to the mountaintop for sure. I mean, the mountaintop will take some good health luck, I think.
Underrated bat from this group?
I'm going to go with Cole Young. I think that spot is waiting for him. He's going to platoon. There's a max EV issue here where, he played as long in AAA as he did in the majors, and he only hit one 109 down there, and then he came up and hit one 114. So, is he actually capable of that kind of power, or is that just a fluky hit or a misread or whatever it is? I don't know if I care that much, because I see a guy who controls the zone really well, makes a lot of contact, and I think has non-zero power. That's how I'm going to put it. I think this is a guy who could maybe put up 130, 140 ISOs in the future, maybe even a 150. If he does that, he's going to slug 400. He's going to have like a 330 OBP, 250 batting average, be like a 15-10 guy. I mean, it all seems a little bit like Brendan Donovan.
I'll put Brendan Donovan's name into this conversation, especially if you're playing in an OBP or a points league. I think the category where we really haven't seen anything from him is stolen bases for his career. Brendan Donovan is 15 for 27. The only reason I bring this up is that I'm genuinely curious to see the impact of the base running coaches. I think it was Eric Young Jr., who was in that position at first base for Seattle last year, that may have had a significant impact on the efficiency of Randy Arozarena and the suddenly fleet of foot Josh Naylor. So I just want to see if Donovan could add something like that to his game. He doesn't necessarily have to do it in points leagues, but very, very much a useful player that gets overlooked in some formats. Underrated starting pitcher out of that bunch.
I'm going to go with Bryce Miller. If you are looking at YouTube, and I will put these on Discord later, you will see that there's still a good foundation here for Bryce Miller. The four seam was there. The locations were worse than usual, and that's what he reported, that with the injury, he just didn't have his fastball command that he used to. The splitter was there stuff-wise, and the curve was there stuff-wise. If he can locate the sinker better, he'll have a 4-pitch mix that I really believe in. I know that the slider and the sweeper, and the cutter, he's been tinkering with those guys. If he breaks out or if he goes further, he finds something there in the slider, sweeper, and cutter that's better. But as a four-seam splitter guy, just foundationally, he's got enough. Four-seam splitter and the occasional curve. Maybe he just needs to actually winnow down his arsenal a little bit. Because he throws so many four-seamers too, that it's like always four-seam and something else. Why don't he ramp up the splitters and be more like 40% four-seams, 30% splitters, and fill in the rest with the rest of the pitches. Anyway, I see different ways for him to break out. I see a foundation here where the stuff is there, and I'm hoping for better health and command. He is going so low that the health risk is okay. If he gets any sort of helium, I might be out just because, it is a significant health risk. He had a recommendation for a surgery and he didn't get it.
Yeah, I think the ADP is about 100 plus picks later than it was this time last year. So if you see him this spring and he's healthy, he is going to move up. But that's why you're getting a discount. He didn't have the surgery to get the problem completely removed. So that's sort of lingering as a possible carryover problem for Bryce Miller here in 2026. Passing Trevor's recommendation along, he suggested George Kirby as being underrated. I actually agree with that. It's subtle because George Kirby goes around pick 60 overall, but I just don't see that much of a difference between Kirby and the other Mariners starters going ahead of him. Both Brian Wu and Logan Gilbert go about 20 to 25 picks earlier, but we saw George Kirby push that K rate up to 26.1%. Best we've seen in the big leagues. Unfortunately, it came with the lowest innings total we've seen from him in 4 years, and it came with an ERA that started with a 4. I just don't think that's where his true skills are. We've seen George Kirby make a lot of adjustments. We know the command's great. I think there's a reason to believe he could actually push his way at least into the Cy Young conversation. I know it's tough with Skubal and Crochet at the top of the board in the AL, but I like the little bit of a discount you're getting on Kirby. You could make him your ace and be kind of a wait on your first pitcher sort of team, and I think you'd do just fine.
I think one thing that people miss is that he's such a tinkerer that there's still there's still something could be unlocked. Like, for example, last year had the best strikeout rate of his career at 26%, and he also learned a sinker grip from Brian Wu in the second half. Which is the thing that I love the most about these Mariners pitchers. They all talk to each other. Wu's trying to learn a better changeup from Luis Castillo. Gilbert and Miller have more similar arm slots, so they end up talking a lot. They keep tweaking their splitters by talking to each other. And Kirby going out here and saying, we may not have the same arm slot, but give me your sinker grip to Brian Wu. I love that. He got 2 inches more drop in the second half. That becomes a better pitch for him. His four seam's not that great. So if he can kind of maybe go 50-50 four seam sinkers, then maybe he can get more out of his fastballs and keep that 26% strikeout rate and put an ERA next to it that makes more sense. So he has some skills growth still left in him, I think.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that. Real quick, one underrated reliever, because you'd be thinking about this in a really deep league where you're basically just hedging against the possibility of Andres Munoz losing time to an injury.
Yeah, I guess it's just Matt Brash. In terms of how the bullpen is built in Seattle, I love Jose Ferrer, and I think they're going to get a little bit more out of him by tweaking that pitch mix. And it's possible with Gabe Spire there that Jose Ferrer could, steal some saves. But Gabe Spire himself is also really excellent. And so who's to say that Gabe Spire is not ahead of Jose Ferrer on the pecking chart, and he gets the first chance at lefty saves. So it's just an excellent bullpen all around. And so maybe you just want the guy who you think is going to set up. And for me, that's Matt Brash.
Yeah, just looked a lot like himself post-injury last year, too. So a full run of health for him in 2026 could be huge, even if it's mostly getting holds and being part of the bridge to the ninth inning. Let's go on to Pittsburgh. We'll preview these Pirates, who I think have become a lot more interesting over the last few months, pretty aggressively changing up that hitter group. You add Ryan O'Hearn and Marcell Ozuna in free agency and trade for Brandon Lau. And then the new in is a guy that's not necessarily a transaction, but the possibility that you bring up Connor Griffin maybe for opening day to be your shortstop, kind of puts the cherry on top as far as rebuilding this lineup in a hurry and bringing not only the thump from those veterans, but the possibility of maybe your best position player that we've seen in a long time. Like, that's the type of ceiling Connor Griffin brings. I think when we had Keith Law on the show a couple of weeks ago, Keith said best prospect since Mike Trout, potentially. So if you're a Pirates fan, you have to feel about as good as you've felt going into a season in at least 5 years.
It's amazing how much this offense has been remade. I'm just looking at the different names at the top of the charts, and they're almost all different. I mean, Brian Reynolds is there. O'Neill Cruz is there. But if you look over at Fangraphs at the top of the depth charts, Ryan O'Hearn, Brandon Lau, Marcell Ozuna, Connor Griffin is who they have at top of short, just because it's a year-long depth chart there. Spencer Horwitz even was hurt for a lot of last year and wasn't, playing a lot of first base for them. This is a revamp on the fly. Even some of the backup names that could be really relevant are new. Yostinson Garcia came over in the Oviedo trade, and Rafael Flores came over in the Bednar trade. If they finally decide that, Henry Davis isn't going to cut it, or there's an injury behind the plate, which happens all the time, maybe Rafael Flores is ahead of Endy Rodriguez, who's had a heck of a time with his injuries. I got an update from somebody, and it was amazing. He had a surgery that had staples. They told him he was free to rehab, and he pulled the staples out, and there was just you can tell, because you're like, what happened to Endy Rodriguez last year? It was not good. It was bad injury stuff, and it was a whole season that was just lost. So maybe Rafael Flores ahead of there, or, maybe, Ozuna, isn't what they thought he was going to be, or he gets hurt. Rafael Flores is going to be important depth for this team this year. And Yostinson Garcia, the password, I think he could push his way into this team, even as it's constituted, because they're saying right now, one of the notes says that Garcia looks good in defensive drills. So if he can play center field, is Mangum a great center fielder? Right now, Mangum is probably the backup center fielder, the backup outfielder in general. But there's some ways for guys to push on to this, and I think that's good. Quality depth you want. In case something doesn't work out, you want quality depth. They also have the 8 second baseman that they haven't figured out what to do, and I think they're gonna throw their 8 second baseman at third base, and somebody's gonna win there. Triolo, Gonzalez, York, somebody's gonna win that third base job, and it doesn't have to be Triolo as much as he's the favorite.
I think the rule of 5 is interesting here, though, because we know Brandon Lau historically hasn't brought a lot to the table against lefties, so you may want to platoon him, at least against the toughest lefties. O'Neill Cruz, you could argue we're at the point now where you start to think about that. And
he has been platooned before, even.
Yeah, I feel like that's
aggressively.
No, but I think previously it was definitely a mistake because you want to give guys opportunities when you're rebuilding. If they're in the playoff hunt, that might be one of the areas where they whittle away at someone's playing time a little bit to mix and match a bit more. I would say I'm putting Cruz in the 5 right now to start the season. I think he's an everyday guy because they should see what he can do.
Right.
I think it's Reynolds, it's Cruz, it's probably Ozuna because he's a right-handed hitting DH and they're paying him. If Griffin makes the opening day roster, I think it's Griffin. You're not really mixing and matching at shortstop. And then that last spot is the one that I keep looking at and saying, I'm not sure I know exactly who it is between the likes of O'Hearn and Lau. One of those guys probably doesn't play against lefties if Griffin's on the team.
Yeah, I actually think it's hard to figure out who is the lefty that plays all the time because, Lau hasn't done that historically. Horwitz has been platooned, and Ryan O'Hearn has been platooned. So, if you were going to go, then let me find a righty that's going to play every day, then Jared Triolo is going to play every day. But I think they're going to want to cycle through guys, not necessarily platoon him, short side platoon him, but they're not, I don't think they're going to see Jared Triolo is the future, done, everyday guy. They're looking for a 5th guy is how I would put it. And it could be Horwitz, it could be O'Hearn. I don't think it's going to be Lau, and it could be Triolo, somebody there is going to win and have more playing time than they're projected for right now.
Yeah, so kind of a fun depth chart to pick apart for those reasons. I think the strength of this team for the last couple of seasons has been pitching, right? Organizationally speaking, they've shown the ability to develop quality big league pitching, and that's not saying the Pirates made Paul Skenes. It's saying that the guys behind Paul Skenes are actually pretty good, and I think that's a development thing that's different than what they had 7 or 8 years ago, right? There was a gap. Like for a little while, Ray Searage and company kind of had that dialed in and figured out. For a few years, they didn't have pitching solved, and now I think they're back on the side of being a good organization in that regard. Behind Skenes, Mitch Keller still there, mostly chewing up innings, doing it at an above-average clip. That has a lot of value. It's not very exciting. It's not very sexy from a fantasy perspective. But we're looking at guys like Bubba Chandler and Braxton Ashcraft. Eventually, we get Jared Jones back from Tommy John surgery. And once that happens, I think that's your 5, as long as that group is entirely healthy. But there's opportunity, I think, in the short term, while Jones works his way back, for someone to emerge and maybe provide a little bit of early season value.
I don't know why he's not going to be ready for the beginning of the season, because he lost all of last year. But I do think that his surgery was delayed a little bit because they were trying to do something else first, if I remember correctly. And then also they may just be trying to backload his innings so that they get more of them in the second half than the first half. Whatever case, it does look like Jared Jones won't be ready for opening day, which opens the door for free agent acquisition Jose Urquidy. Oh my goodness! I get crap. I've been getting some crap for Bido, and I used to get crap for Urquidy, and I just want to point out that every year I have to have a starter that I like in like the 45th round of 15-team, 50-league teams. It's like maybe I pushed it a little bit too hard with Urquidy. I learned from Urquidy, and I didn't push Bido. I had a lot of shares of Bido. I had picked them all like around 46, 47, and the 700th pick. So I don't actually feel that sorry about Bido at all. Like it's just one of those guys that didn't work out. Urquidy I might have pushed a little bit harder, but here are the Pirates signing him, giving him another chance. I would rather see Hunter Barco. I think I would rather, from a fantasy standpoint, and I'm a little bit more interested in Barco. Barco has a good splitter, and I'm just interested in guys that have good splitters, like a 3-pitch mix like this with a good splitter, decent velo, okay strikeout rates. Like this is Barco has something going, and I'd rather see him than Urquidy myself. So I don't know what the major league deal means for Urquidy. If it was a major league deal, yes, he signed a major league deal. So like you think that he gets a chance ahead of Barco, I think. Which is a little bit of a shame.
Are you in or out on Bubba Chandler with a February Draft Champions ADP of pick 150?
Who is the would you rather on that?
Oh, league-wide, filter off the Pirates here. League-wide, around pick 150, you'd be looking at maybe Zach Wheeler. He's starting to trend up, though, so let's throw him out of the conversation. Nathan Eovaldi.
I think it's a mistake because that's a really, really big surgery he just had.
Nathan Eovaldi versus Chandler, and I would say Trey Savage would be the neighbor on the other side. That'd be the trio you're kind of looking at clustered right together right now.
I have Trey Savage and Eovaldi ahead of Chandler. My projections are better for them. The Stuff Plus number for Savage, which is relevant because they're small sample guys, both of them, is better. So the ERA projection is better, and the strikeout rate projection is better for Savage than Chandler. They're within 10 picks of each other, all three of them. And I could see when you're doing Eovaldi versus Chandler, especially if you're in like a 12-team league, take Chandler. Take Chandler.
Play the ceiling game, even though Eovaldi was phenomenal last year.
Yeah, I think Eovaldi's coming off surgery. I don't think he's going to do a 1.7 again. I guess the one question with Chandler is just a little bit of a disconnect between what the kind of what the model says, and some disagreement between the model and scouts and the results. Bubba, his changeup I think is really good, and hey, Stuff Plus says it's his worst pitch. That's great. And his slider last year, it says his changeup is bad. The model says his changeup is bad. 40% whiff rate. Good job, model. And then the model says the slider is really good. And yes, it did have a good slugging and X slugging, but the scouts thought the slider was behind. We heard Keith Law himself say that. And then there's a 23% whiff rate on the slider. That's way below average. And so there's still some question about how Chandler is going to port over to the major leagues. It's just, I think that there's a larger gap for pitchers than hitters, honestly. Bubba Chandler could be as exciting as Connor Griffin, and I would take Connor Griffin every time. I'm not saying that they are of the same. I'm just saying, pitchers have to prove so much, especially starting pitchers have to prove that they have the command of these multiple pitches, that they don't necessarily even have to have that level of command in the minor leagues. They have to be able to get lefties and righties out in the major leagues. And, in the minor leagues, they could probably just bully their way through some lefties with velo or whatever. So there's a lot of questions that he has to answer still. And I like him, and I would play him. I will pick him in the top 40. And I think right now he's right next to Wheeler in my rankings. But I guess we'll see what Wheeler looks like in spring. He's going to get on the mound at some point, and that'll change some minds. I want to see some velo numbers from Zach Wheeler for sure. Yeah,
I just think the reports on Wheeler have been very encouraging throughout the winter and into the early weeks of spring training. So I think that explains exactly why he's moving up. Timetable for his return doesn't seem as bad as we thought at the time of his surgery. We'll talk about the bullpen in just a minute. We look at some underrated relievers because I think we're both Dennis Santana skeptics. PIttsburgh has a win total projection of 81.8 for these Pirates. Too hot, too cold, or just right?
I think they start to push into wild card territory. I think they're going to get up to 83, 84, 85, something in there. I don't know if they're going to win a wild card, but I bet you they're playing meaningful baseball in September. I think they're going to be, 2 or 3 games out, and, hey, if they get lucky and pull off a stretch, they could get in.
Yeah, I think, the projection's a lot lower than the Mariners. I think there's some similar concerns maybe if they lose a key starter. There just might not be enough quality to backfill. Like that could be the one
did trade away
devastating
from that,
thing.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, because they traded some depth away, and that may come back to bite them. We'll see. But I think you're generally right. I think they're going to play some very meaningful games in September. Maybe they end up being the last wild card team. And I think the scenario is what we've talked about, where it's Griffin comes up, plays really well, goes above projection. Skenes turns in another Cy Young caliber season. Like the couple big things up top, and then just a lineup that's better. Your fun fact for the Pirates is not fun at all.
I am devious, dude.
Yeah, dude, your fun facts are mean.
Since free agency was started in 1975, the Pirates have had 6 years with an above-average offense. And guess what? Those happened in the 70s. So this century, one time they've had an above-average offense in 2014. So, yeah. No, that's meant to be like it hasn't happened before, but it could happen this year.
It's only happened once this century, but it could happen again this year. So yeah, cheer up, Pirates fans. You gave him an A- for the off-season grade. I feel like your fun facts are mean, but you're a generous grader.
Well, I love actually what they did. There's some questionable politics with the Ozuna signing, but they needed a bat, and they were willing to stretch that to get that bat. O'Hearn is a really good player. I think the trade for Brandon Lau was a risk. They took a risk. Michael Burrows is at least a sort of 3-4 type guy for a while, and Brandon Lau is under contract for 1 year. Jake Mangum, for me, is a backup corner outfielder. Although the third part of that deal, we'll talk about in a little bit, the reliever they got. I think they took some risk. The reason it's a minus and not more is, it might have been an A proper if Gino Suarez had signed there.
Yeah, I could see that being the case. And again, we're grading these on a curve within the framework of what's realistic for a team to do based on rough estimates of what their budget is and the resources they presently have available. So I'm not going to push too hard against the A- grade for the Pirates. Some fantasy favorites, an underrated bat here. I'm not at all surprised you wanted to use this opportunity to present a chart that includes Connor Griffin.
Yes, actually, username Griff on Discord just looked at, because Connor Griffin is 19. So, the buzz is increasingly that he might get the chance. And, there's a cynical version of the buzz where it's like, oh, he's going to sign a long-term extension and be there in opening day because he signed that extension. That is just as a little cynical aside, as an agent, that'd be a really interesting idea is like, if I can sign him to this extension now and I give them a year of free agency or 2 years or whatever they want, right? If I sign them now at 19 and he gets into the lineup on opening day at 19, he'll be back to free agency well before 30, and he'll get another huge deal. So it won't be like I'm signing away any of those like premium years, and I will get him by signing this deal. I can get him into the lineup at 19. So I wonder if they ever say those things out loud to each other. But if he gets into the lineup at 19, the list of players that have had 300 plate appearances at 19 years old is amazing. And in fact, just if he gets in, you should have Connor Griffin on your team, because the median outcome from the 20 players that have done this recently, according to this chart by Griff on Discord, the median outcome is 2012 Bryce Harper with a 121 WRC plus, a 270 average, 22 homers, and 18 stolen bases. That would not be insane for Connor Griffin to do this year. In fact, it's the median outcome for large sample 19-year-olds. And the other 19-year-olds, of course, are Mike Trout, Fernando Tatis Jr., Juan Soto, Ronald Acuna Jr., Carlos Correa. The busts on here, some have nothing to do with anything, Wander Franco. Some are just Jason Hayward, He
was actually good at the beginning.
He was good at the beginning. Yeah, his first season, 134 WRC plus. He's above the median.
He's never the same after that hit by pitch in the face. Anyway,
yeah,
not important there for today.
But the worst names on this list are Starlin Castro, Rougned Odor, who's now come up twice in weird comp things, Elvis Andrus, and Jurickson Profar. Which Profar had a high profile shoulder injury. Elvis Andrus had a great career. Like, what if Connor Griffin came up and did what Elvis Andrus did, to hit 267 with 6 homers and 33 stolen bases? That's like one of the worst outcomes for a 19-year-old. You know what? That returns fantasy value where he's going.
Yeah, well, it's a well-reasoned argument. I think when an elite prospect gets moved that quickly, generally it's for a reason and something pretty good actually happens. That's why taking the chance before the price goes to the moon is really important. More information only brings the prices up.
There is another good retort, though. Username Corey on Discord shared Jared Kelenich's numbers at the same age, in the same levels, same organization. They were better than Connor Griffin's.
I don't think, anyway. as much as I know that I thought Kelenic was going to be great. I don't think the way people are talking about Griffin and the way people talked about Kelenic is exactly the same. I think there's a little more confidence in Connor Griffin being a superstar than there was in Kelenic. And there was plenty of confidence in Kelenic, so sometimes the masses just get it wrong. I'll be the proxy for Trevor and throw Brandon Lau's name in here just as an underrated bat, because he is 65th in WRC+. There are 403 qualified hitters if you take a 3-year leaderboard and just see like who's actually good over the last 3 years. To see a guy that has 117 WRC+, it's in the realm of Trey Turner, Austin Riley, Ian Happ. It's not that far off of Manny Machado. To get a hitter like that, even if it's only for 1 year, that brings a lot of power, that's pretty nice. And it's not just Lau in that conversation too. It's kind of amazing. Spencer Horowitz has a 122 WRC plus during that span as well. So just getting him healthy, I think, is going to be important. But yeah, they've done done some good things here with this
Yeah,
lineup.
we don't talk enough about daily leagues maybe sometimes, and the Pirates, I think, will have a few players that I like in daily leagues. Ottoneu, in particular, Horwitz as a backup first baseman util, he's going for like $1 in Ottoneu drafts. And in points leagues, to get a guy who can give you 4.5 points a game, with that dollar value attached to him is pretty good. I think that Lau will be also a really like a beast in daily leagues if you can just slot him out against lefties.
An underrated starting pitcher here. Not at all surprised to see Braxton Ashcraft popping up on the rundown.
If you are an Athletic subscriber, and you should be, the draft kit is up, and we have all sorts of goodies in there. Jake Seeley's rankings, your rankings, my rankings. And one of the first articles was Pitcher Sleepers, where we all got to pick a pitcher sleeper. I picked Braxton Ashcraft, and I laid out a checklist for young starting pitchers that you need to have. One, what do you need to have? You need to have an out pitch. Braxton Ashcraft has a slizzing 84-mile-an-hour curveball that was the third best curveball by Stuff Plus last year, behind two relievers, which he kind of was in between being a reliever and starter. But anyway, I think he's got the out pitch. The second thing you need to do, can you get lefties out? This is a bit of a question for him because Chandler's fastball is not that Ashcraft's. This is a little bit of a question because Ashcraft's fastball is not that great, and he added a sinker, and that's good. And so you're saying, well, the sinker's not good against lefties. What does he have against? What hard pitches does he have against lefties? Well, Braxton Ashcraft throws a 90 to 92 mile an hour slider that functions as a cutter that the Stuff Plus model says is equally good against both hands. So what I'm thinking is he's secretly cutter curve with a four seam and sinker. That answers the third question, which is for starters, which is, do you have a wide enough arsenal to turn the lineup over multiple times? I say with 4 pitches, he does. And the last question is bulk. And as I said in my write-up, if you have a check next to each one of those, you're not a sleeper anymore. So there is no check next to Braxton Ashcraft for bulk. We do not know how many innings he can put together. He has had various ailments in the shoulder and the knee and the non-throwing shoulder, but he also had TJ, all sorts of stuff. He has a bottom shelf health grade, a top shelf stuff grade, a great home park. That's sleeper enough for me.
Yeah, I like Ashcraft a lot where he's been going. We'll keep it moving. An underrated reliever because of our concerns about Dennis Santana. Low strikeout rates from Santana throughout his time in the big leagues. That's the main reason why I don't think he's going to keep the job. I just don't think he misses enough bats. They added a lot to this bullpen unit. Mason Montgomery came back as part of that big trade they made with the Astros and Rays. They signed Gregory Soto, so they've got a few different options. Who do you like if you're taking a shot in this bullpen trying to find the next closer in Pittsburgh?
If you're looking at the chart right now, the question is, are there sleepers? And the answer is yes, I think, but they may not be the guys that are at the top of the depth chart right now. Over at Fangraphs, they've got Dennis Santana and Isaac Matson at the top. Those may be their worst relievers in the bullpen. They both have ERA projections over 4 and below average strikeout rate projections. If you wonder why we're so down on Dennis Santana, I would point out that the big difference between now and when he was throwing up 5 ERAs, in the past, is that he throws his four seam a little bit more now, and it's not a good four seam. So I don't see what the big. I don't see that there's like, aha, he's a totally different pitcher than when he used to have ERAs over 5. I see this guy as a useful veteran with 2 guys behind him that have great stuff. Gregory Soto and Mason Montgomery have lights out stuff. They also cannot command the ball. So if you have to paint me into a corner, I say the sleeper in this bullpen is Soto Montgomery.
You jammed them both together. The presence of one makes the other a more likely closer, though, since they've got multiple high-leverage lefties they can choose from. My lean is that Soto would get the first chance because he's done the job in the past. I think he's shown a little bit of skills growth over time, too. The command is still a concern, but it's not maybe as much of a concern as it was earlier in his career. But a lot of optimism around these Pirates for us in this preview. One more team to get to. We have the Marlins closing things out for us today. And of course, probably the biggest move they made was the decision to trade away Edward Cabrera. Owen Casey is the main player they got back, and we should see a lot of Owen Casey in this lineup this season. They did add Pete Fairbanks and Chris Paddock. Fairbanks kind of becomes the clear-cut closer because of the Ronnie Enriquez injury, which is really unfortunate. And then Paddock probably is a bridge guy in the rotation, at least to begin the season. And then if he's pitching well, maybe he's a trade candidate. If he's not pitching well, we maybe have hit the point in his career where a team would shift him into a relief role and see what happens. So an interesting offseason here. And again, a team that doesn't spend a lot of money because they're just not in that point in the cycle. It's still Peter Bendix and company kind of remaking this to be a little more of a Raisian looking organization. Let's talk about the group of hitters. We'll start with Casey. I mean, is Casey in their group of 5? Because this is a team where I think you could easily talk yourself into a lot of kind of part-time guys ending up in larger roles depending on who you want to squeeze for playing time. They have one guy by ATC projected to be an above-average hitter by WRC+. It's Kyle Stowers. They have a lot of guys who are close, right? Agustin Ramirez at a 98, Jacob Marcy at a 98, Otto Lopez at a 95. If Lopez is the regular shortstop, Marcy's the regular center fielder, and Ramirez has been working on his defense behind the plate, and he's the primary catcher, those guys will all play a lot. And that can happen, and there's still not even a 5th player in there yet. And then there's still some questions about platoons and how they could mix and match at those spots, and with Ramirez being a catcher that can move around, like he's not even necessarily a true rule of 5 guy, even if he plays a lot.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that if you use Oopsie bat projections, which like bat speed, and the Marlins like bat speed, Stowers, Casey, Ramirez, and Morel actually end up above average. We're going to put that Morel one apart from the rest because I've been burned too often. I try not to put somebody on a no draft list, but he's on my no draft list.
Oh,
I'm
that bad,
dude.
huh?
I don't know. The defense is so bad, right? The defense is so bad, and the strikeout rate is so bad that he's just bat speed. You know what I mean? Like it's just that one thing. So I'm not that into him. But what I would say is up the middle, you've got a righty in Otto Lopez and a swing. You have a switch hitter in Xavier Edwards. I think if they're healthy, you just go with it. You know, they're not the best, middle infield in baseball, but they're who you got, and they're better than what's behind them, and there's no real reason to platoon them. So I think they're in the 5. Kyle Stowers is in the 5. That's 3. Marcy, left-handed center fielder. You could platoon with Sanoja. In fact, righty Javier Sanoja could be the platoon mate for any number of people because he's listed as the backup center fielder, backup shortstop, and backup second baseman, which is why I have more than a few shares of him in draft and holds as just a utility guy backup plan. My long story short, I think, you kind of want to see if Marcy is a everyday player for you. Now, that's 4. Now you're looking at third base, first base, DH, and you're looking and you're saying, what are you going to do there? What is interesting is they've taken Norby, Pauly, Morel, and Hicks and given them all ground balls at first base. That's like one of those videos that's come out of spring training.
It's like a super cut of everybody getting reps at first base.
Yeah. So to me, that suggests that they don't know what they're doing at third and first, and they're gonna run through all the different candidates at third and first. DH, you have Ramirez when he's not catching, and you have Heriberto Hernandez, who is right-handed, who can be the platoon partner for Casey. So there is a platoon partner for him there, except I don't know. There's a 5th guy, right? There's a 5th guy, right? What's the 4 guys are Lopez, Edwards, Stowers, and Ramirez, and there's a 5th guy. Is it Marcy or is it Casey?
I think it's Marcy because of his defense.
Fielder.
Yeah. And then again, like with Ramirez, if you're moving him around, you could say both. And Ramirez is a catcher, but plays more than most catchers to start the year. That's an acceptable way to look at the playing time here.
Right. Yeah. He could be your fifth too. That's true.
I mean, the third base situation is weird. I kind of liked Connor Norby, and
I had Ramirez as part of the four. So
you had Ramirez in there, but I'm saying Ramirez,
yeah.
like, if you didn't want to count him as part of that, he could still play a lot because he's in the mix at catcher. Like, the catcher being in the five is always a little bit weird because most teams used at least two different guys to catch. But he shuffles around, and they don't have first base solved. I think you can lean on as many as 4 or 5 different guys and make a compelling argument for sleeper status. And like 3 or 4 of those 5 guys might not do anything for fantasy this year because they might not play enough. They might get a chance, fall on their face. Someone else is going to take over because they're in that, like, sift through, find those fringe guys, those guys that have torn up the upper levels of the minor leagues that haven't had that run of success yet. That's what they're doing right now as an org. Connor Norby, I think he's better than Graham Pauley. Like, I would play Connor Norby if I were them for this year, at least for the first half of this year. And if it doesn't work out, maybe you make a change mid-season. So I still like Norby a little bit more than the field. I'll even say he's probably the underrated bat for me, or at least one of the underrated bats.
You know, there's something that happens in the sifting through process is that you kind of lower the ceiling for a lot of these guys, you know. If you still want to see if Sanoa is meaningful, maybe you're not straight platooning Marcy, but you're getting Sanoa in there sometimes against lefties, right? If you want to know that if Paulie is useful to you at all, then you're going to get him in there at first base and the third base. You want to know where he plays, you know, that sort of thing. If you want to know if Hernandez, if Heriberto Hernandez is anything to you going forward, then you want to get him in the lineup sometimes, right? And so I think all of this sifting through will reduce everybody but maybe Stowers and the middle infielders, ability to get to 650 plate appearances. And maybe even the middle infielders, if you want Sanoha, if you want to see if he's actually a shortstop or a second baseman, if you want to showcase him for a trade, you know. So there's so much going on here that I think a lot of these guys are better daily league guys. I have Casey as a $1 or $2 bat in Autonew, and I love it because, you know, in Autonew you have 5 outfielders, you have 40-man rosters, it's daily lineups, boom, Casey. You know, like, you know, I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit to underrated sleeper bat, but I'm going to do that with Casey because they have a type. Kyle Stowers has a 75-mile-an-hour bat speed, a 34 degree tilt, and a 31.5 inch intercept in front of the center mass. Owen Casey has a 75-mile-an-hour bat speed, a 35 degree tilt, and a 32 inch intercept versus the center of mass. These swings are very similar. Their problems are similar. Their potential outcomes are similar. They have a type to an extent. It worked for Kyle Stowers, and it could work again for Owen Casey. So if you can get Casey as a 6th, 7th outfielder, you know, a last bat, an Autonew platoon outfielder, I love him in those cases. I don't want you to depend on him necessarily.
Yeah, I think my Norby argument is pretty simple. I don't think he's a bad defender at third. That could be good enough. As a righty, the downside would be he'd be small side platoon with Paulie if they did that. But I think Norby showed some improvements in terms of swing and miss. Got down to a 26% K rate last year after coming in at 33% in his debut. And he hits the ball hard enough to be interesting. Like, that's the main thing. Is like, he does. I know it's a little bit of a weird swing, but he does enough things well where I think you want to try to move forward with him as part of this group and see what actually happens. I thought it's interesting that Trevor had Morel down as an underrated bat because it breaks your brain. There's things that you can obviously like. 95th percentile in 90th percentile EV, right? He hits the ball very hard when he hits it, but he's 4th percentile in zone contact percentage.
Oh my gosh.
Whiffs versus secondaries, 7th percentile. These numbers coming from Robert Orr's damage app. So, like, yeah, he's 95th percentile in Seager, but yet really, really bad making contact in the zone. So I don't know if they have a way of helping him close a hole or possibly 2 if he's got 2 holes in the zone. But it could be a quick burn. It could just be, here's some time. Let's see what you do. If we don't like it, you're going to a smaller role. And the lack of a defensive position does make it tough. I think there's still late draft and hold appeal with Morel. I'm not putting him on the do not draft list. I just think in most leagues he's a wait and see.
Yeah, I don't know. I I just feel like I've tried this 2 straight years, and what I got for it was a 199 average, a couple homers.
I think the fun part of this team is, again, it's pitching. You mentioned the sleeper article on The Athletic. Max Meyer was my underrated pitcher, so I'm glad you flagged him. What did you like about him? I just think he already made adjustments before he got hurt last year, and those adjustments to me gave him a much deeper arsenal, good velo. I think he was trying to pitch with that hip injury before it ended his season. I think that's part of why things unraveled, because he was cruising to begin 2025.
Yeah, I think I saw enough in the new slot and the new stuff. It is at its core now a bit of a sinker slider situation, but the changeup is pretty good, and the four seam and the sweeper are decent. So he's put a constellation around the pitches that he's got, and it's a nice home park, and I think the role is there for him. He showed command of all 5 of his pitches, and the question is health. It's nice when you think that you have questions of team context, role, and skills is a potential questions for every starter, right? And I think for him, the team context is all good. It's a good home park, and he has a spot in the rotation if he's healthy, right? And then in terms of skill, yeah, there's some question, but where he's going in drafts, if you have a half question for skill and a full question for health, it's all right. You know where he's going.
Late enough for sure. Definitely someone I like. I would actually draft him as one of my last pitchers, even in a 12-team league. I think there's enough ceiling there. If it doesn't work out, cut him, move on.
Dude, Trevor's killing both of us on this one. He put down Chris Paddock.
I don't know if he knows about Never Paddock. I don't know if that's come up on a day where he's hosted with us or if he's caught those episodes, if it hasn't been, but
I didn't know about Never Morel until today, but
yeah, I mean, you discovered that about yourself. We're always learning about ourselves as we go through these shows. The rotation behind Sandy Alcantara and Yuri Perez, I love Yuri, by the way. We talked a lot about him on the starting pitcher preview. The main reason is I just think he's going to take a step forward. I think he'll be a lot more effective on the road. Those home road splits are so extreme. They just don't make sense to me. I think the stuff's electric, and now that he's further removed from surgery, 150 plus great innings seem like they're coming from him. So I'm fine taking Yuri Perez where he goes. We talked about Meyer as a sleeper. They also have guys like Robbie Snelling, Thomas White. I think we're going to see a lot of them. Even if they're not in the initial rotation, I think we're going to see most of the year for Robbie Snelling happening in Miami.
Yeah, some of the projections for Braxton Garrett aren't super exciting, and his health history has been really bad. He had 37 innings in 2024 and none last year. So, I don't know what the over-under is on a guy like that. I think it starts with a, double-digit number.
Yeah, I want him to be healthy for his sake, but I just can't expect it.
Yeah, then Myers dealing with his stuff. And then, Chris Paddock could just be, a shot in the dark. With a $4 million contract, the market has not rendered its decision if he's a starter reliever. $4 million could be either.
There's some front offices with algorithms that are spitting out Never Paddock. I think it's starting to happen. It's caught on.
So Snelling, I think, is next. Jansen Junk will be really interesting. Will he go into like a Jacob Junis role where he's in between? He has really good command, not great stuff, but he seems wasted in the bullpen fully because I don't think that his stuff will rise to the level of a ninth inning guy. So I think he's better. Maybe he's your stretch guy, your sixth starter that's on the roster. Maybe he's piggybacking with Paddock at the beginning. Maybe they're just in an open competition for that last role. But Snelling is knocking on the doorstep, and I think he gets the first shot afterwards.
Yeah, I think he could also be relevant in 12-team leagues as well. And once we see Thomas White, I think has even more ceiling, then I think we'd have Thomas White on redraft radars as well. I just think he may have to wait a little bit longer because they've sort of padded the back of that rotation with that Chris Paddock addition. We know Pete Fairbanks has an extensive injury history. We also know the stuff's not quite as good as it was a couple of years ago. So if you're looking for a fallback option, should Pete Fairbanks miss some time this year, who is your favorite Marlins reliever in the bullpen behind him?
Yeah, I'm putting up the bullpen chart right now, and it's pretty obvious that Calvin Fauché is the best reliever in this bullpen other than Pete Fairbanks, or at least in terms of guys with track records, guys who were around last year. That's an important distinction to make because Andrew Nardi's numbers look great in the model. He's got a 108 stuff plus, 110 pitching sluff. He 330. He actually has the lowest ERA projection in this bullpen and the highest strikeout rate projection in this bullpen. Make Andrew Nardi the closer. Problem is, Andrew Nardi's a left-hander, and the only other left-hander I have listed is Cade Gibson, and Cade Gibson is the worst projected pitcher on the Marlins roster, according to Oopsie. So they may just want to keep Nardi as the setup man with Fauché. And if Fairbanks goes down, it's a little easier to replace Fauché with Bender, who's another right-hander, than it is to promote Nardi to be the closer and then have to figure out how to get lefties out.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to say peace out on the Marlins bullpen if Fairbanks gets hurt. We've seen enough of this movie before with a lot of the same characters.
It wasn't that much fun last year.
No, so I think I'm just going to let everybody else throw a fab at that problem unless something changes with a few of the relievers that we've seen in the last couple of years.
I want to review this. Hold on. I want to review this. Marlins, was it really as bad as we think? Marlins relievers last year, in terms of saves, we had 15 from Calvin Fauché with a 3.28 ERA. What are you talking about? That's fine.
No, that's pretty good. So, yeah, if you're going to say you have to take someone, it's Fauché, but how did he not take the job and run with it a year ago, given the state of things?
And why did they? Yeah, they went and signed somebody. They said that's not good enough. He had 0 wins above replacement. That's pretty interesting. Not a good strikeout rate.
You dropped a B- grade on them for the offseason.
I guess I should be more negative. I don't know. What do you think? I like Casey, so I don't know. Edward Cabrera, should he have gotten more than Casey back? He did. There were other players in the deal.
Scary injury history, man. I think they were right to try and move Cabrera when they did. I think if they found an everyday or near everyday position player in Casey, plus the other pieces of that trade, then they probably did okay there. I think the B- is fine. It's tough to grade a team like the Marlins because there's only a few levers they have to pull in any given winter.
Yeah, I don't really want to start critiquing their Rule 5 picks or lack thereof or whatever. I mean, that's what they're in right now. They're just like trying to gather talent. So,
no, I think generally they're heading in the right direction. So 74.3 is the win total projection from PICOTA. Too hot, too cold, or just right?
Just right, too hot, just right. Just, somewhere in there. I think they could sell some pieces again. I don't know. I mean, what pieces? I mean, it was to be Sandy Alcantara. Yeah, that would be the big piece.
Yeah, and there's always the chance that the pitching all just clicks at once, and then they're that surprising wild card contender that some people think the Pirates could be, right? I'd err on the side of too cold. I think Clayton McCullough looks like a good manager. The coaching staff did some pretty interesting things last year, like the front office, and maybe they actually hang around and play it out this year and try to be a spoiler again. I think they were a more pesky team in the second half than people realized too. If your team was contending and caught the Marlins in the second half, you probably
the lineup
felt
leaves
that
me a
little
little
bit.
Cold though, dude.
Well, there's opportunity
pieces,
though.
But
yeah, we got to see how that shakes out. That's where the big questions are. I think the slightly lower offseason grade comes from the uncertain. Maybe they could have had another interesting shot they took in that position player group to kind of stabilize things a little bit. So we shall see. We are going to go on our way out the door. A reminder, you can join our Discord. The conversation continues in there. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Friday.
Thanks for listening.